Uh, Hi YouTube. Potato Smasher here again. Actually, that's not really the way I want to introduce this. I'm really tired. As we close in on the new year, I decided, you know what, before we flip our clocks to 2022, I'd take a look at probably one of my favorite ships in the game, the Montana, the Tier 10 American Tech Tree Fast Battleship. Now, when I say Tech Tree Fast Battleship, it's because there's two lines of American battleships now. You have the Super Dreadnought line that starts or it continues from Colorado to the Kansas, and you end with what is this, Vermont, and then you split off the fast branch where you go to the North Carolina, and you end at the Montana here. This chunky boy right in my port. Now I do have this weird modified skin for it. I really like it, just because aesthetically speaking. Yeah, my graphics settings aren't that great, but who cares? Anyways, just to go over the history of the Montana very quickly, this is supposed to be the follow-on to the Iowa-class battleships. It was designed in the late 1930s, early 1940s, and it was almost produced, actually. But resources were canceled at mid-1943 once Midway occurred, or, sometime after Midway occurred, and the Admiralty, or the BORD, sorry, not was it the Bureau of Ordnance or was the Navy Department, decided to divert funding and resources towards the construction of the more Iowas, I think, and Essex-class aircraft carriers. So you end up with that. Here we have her depicted as she would have been completed finalized, albeit with this skin. If you want to take a look at the Montana without this skin, I do suggest you go elsewhere. It's a very beautiful ship just to look at. If you want to put it from a sort of minor aesthetic sense or point of view. Yep. But of course, that's not really what we're here for. We're here to talk about the ship itself. Now, before I, talk about the ship statistics, let's just go into the build I have this ship set up with. So obviously, everything comes researched because it's a tier 10. Start with main armaments, damage control, artillery plotting room, and this fourth slot. Now, you can do one of two things here. You can either mount damage control systems, which is probably better if you still have trouble managing fire damage, or you can do what I've done and go propulsion module. Now, the reason you're going to go propulsion module is because of the fact that, it's much more comfortable to sort of get out from dead stop, especially considering that Montana's rudder shift isn't that good without the legendary module. Then concealment systems, and finally APRM2 for that juicy dispersion. It's essentially Deadeye plus 1% baked in, and yeah, so you don't really, Montana didn't need Deadeye back when Deadeye was a thing, and it certainly doesn't need it now, not when the consistency on this thing is patently absurd. Now, going into the commander's skills, this is your fairly standard basic BB builds. If you have Halsey or the Doe Brothers, they're great. So you get Gun Feeder, Grease the Gears, Adrenaline Rush, Survivability Experts. Basic Survivability, sorry, not SE. SE is on battle. It's on cruisers and DDs. No SE for BBs. Emergency Repair Expert for the extra heal and the length of damage control time. Concealment Expert, and of course Fire Prevention. I do recommend getting Fire Prevention and Concealment Expert for your first two 4-point skills, then build into Basics of Survivability, not Basics, or then build into AR, and then you can go for the extra heals last, considering that, well, I'm just going to get into this really quickly, actually. Take a look at Montana's healing coefficient. This is without a repair flag. Montana's repair party has an improved repair coefficient of 0.66% per second, or you can recover 66% of the damage you take per second, as opposed to other battleships which are 50%. Same duration, same cooldown, just an improved repair coefficient. The other thing to note is that Montana does have an improved damage control time, or damage control party. it lasts for 20 seconds instead of the standard 15, and that allows you to survive, if your damage control is being taxed, like if you got multiple fires or multiple floods, you can press a damage control, you press that, and you're immune to fires for essentially 20 seconds or longer. If you want to meme around, you can even build into consumables, and you can build the damage control party modification just for the memes, and you end up with like a 30-second damage-on time. You're practically invulnerable to fires and flooding in that period. Well, you're entirely invulnerable. Now, let's start with, the very basics. We're going to go with the armor and the survivability of this ship. Now, Montana has it's towards the top end of the tier 10 battleships when it comes to HP pool, but it's not the largest. The largest used to be Yamato, and then Grocer Kerr first came with 105,800 hit points to Yamato's 97,200. And then Kremlin came with 108,300. So you end up with this sort of gradual HP power creep. However, it's not really HP power creep, considering the fact that more HP means you take more damage from fires and floods, because DOT is percentage based and not a set value. Montana also has fairly good torpedo protection. Not only has a fairly good HP pool, it also has fairly good torpedo protection. It has 96,300 hit points with an improved heal, and it also has 37% torpedo belts. So if you strike this midsection here around this armor belt, you take, I think only 63% of the damage from a torpedo slung at you. So let's say a torpedo does 10,000 damage, you strike the torpedo belt, you're going to end up doing about 6,300. That's just the torpedo belts for you. You take a look at Montana's armor scheme. You'll notice that the bow and stern are 32mm, as is standard for most tier 10 battleships. You can be overmatched by Yamato through the nose, and you can be farmed down by IFHE equipped to light cruisers. So it's best to stay, relatively well angled and protected from them if you want to maximize your chances of survivability. Now, take a look at this. You have a 38mm deck and upper belt. What that means is that IFHE equipped light cruisers cannot penetrate this section. They can penetrate the nose and the stern, but they will not be able to pen this. And that's a significant advantage, considering the fact that a lot of cruisers do rely upon pen damage to actually get anywhere. You are vulnerable to German cruisers like the Mainz, Rhone, Hindenburg, Heber, and such, but it's not too much of a concern, considering that their HE alpha is so low that it takes a very long time for them to actually whittle you down. The other thing is, this kind of plating means that you can bounce Yamato and Shikishima shells. No shells in the game will actually overmatch this armor. So if you were to angle perfectly well enough, you can actually, theoretically speaking, if a Yamato shell comes like this and hits you here, it'll bounce off. That's the good thing about it. Now we have to move to the actual armor itself. So if you take away this, you'll notice that Montana has some spaced armor here between the torpedo bulkhead and the Citadel armor. Her Citadel is actually waterline. It used to be much larger. This entire area here used to be Citadel, and then they lowered it. Of course, if you were to take away the casemates very quickly, you would see that the Citadel deck is actually just this. This deck is 19mm, and then if we were to take away this, it's still 19mm. What's this? Yeah. So yeah, this is essentially her vitals, her Citadel armor. This entire area is not Citadel, though. Keep in mind. Take with the turret armor. You see, because this is just a main armor belt. This is her Citadel right here. It's right at the waterline. There is an internal 19mm deck that protects it. Now, if you take a look at this in overall reference, this area here is her upper belt. If you aim here, you're only going to get full pens. You need to basically catch her in a turn or flat waterline if you want to Citadel her. Her Citadel is extremely tricky to hit compared to before. And note the sloping on the main armor belt. It is sloped back at around, it's a 409mm belt sloped at around, 19 degrees? This means Montana's effective armor is somewhere around 550mm. Like, not 550, somewhere between 500 to 550mm, and it makes her very difficult to Citadel, especially when angled. If you have very high penetration guns, something like a Champagne, or a Slava, you can definitely Citadel this thing, but you're not going to have the easiest of times. So overall, Montana's armor scheme is very trolly. You also have to keep in mind that Montana's turrets are very thickly armored. They are 457mm on the face, and they're sloped back at about, I'd say, it looks like, what, a 35-degree angle roughly? So, citadeling Montana is difficult. Breaking her turrets is also fairly difficult, and overall, it makes Montana's armor scheme fairly reliant. The only place I'd say it falls apart is largely under supercruiser high explosive fire, or something like a Henry or a Venezia, which can just punch into your upper belt. Now keep in mind, look how small this 38mm section is. And the superstructure is fairly large and easy to chunk, but this is going to saturate very quickly. And this is so difficult to hit, like for something like a Venezia, that you don't actually get that much damage. I have Venezia, right? And I have shot at, this Montana's upper belt so many times, and I find myself forced to shoot the superstructure just because I'm not getting any pens. I go for that shot, and it's so thin that, some dunk here, some end up here, and you end up with a lot more shatters than you'd expect. So again, you're vulnerable to Venezia sap at like medium ranges, and you're very vulnerable to supercruiser high explosives, like a Henry, Hindenburg. But that's really most battleships anyways, unless you're a Kremlin. So Montana's armor is very, very good. I'm not going to consider it something like Kremlin levels or Grosha Kurfürst levels, where Kurfürst is extremely difficult to Citadel. Montana is actually easier to Citadel compared to a Kurfürst because that thing has turtleback armor. So you can be Citadels, you can be farmed down. If you play it right, that's never going to happen though. Now we have to move on to her guns. And this is where Montana's sort of fallen behind the competition. Montana's gunnery consists of 4 3-gun 406mm turrets. 4 3-gun turrets with 406mm guns. Now, I say it's fallen out of favor because these days, thanks to the IFHE rework, most Tier 10 cruisers, even some Tier 9s, and no Tier 9 cruiser has a 30mm upper belt, but all Tier 10 cruisers have a 30mm upper belt by default. And 406mm guns cannot overmatch that armor. So what that means is you have to either aim for the nose of certain ships, like if you're fighting a Des Moines or like a Hindenburg, you gotta aim, very carefully, or you have to be very patient and shoot them, when they're vulnerable. Otherwise, you're just gonna end up with a lot of bounces. However, that doesn't mean Montana is, that bad when it comes to gunnery. For one thing, she has 1.9 Sigma on her guns. For another thing, look at that horizontal dispersion at that kind of range. If this was something like a Republic, that would be over 300 meters. It's under 300 meters. And that's really Montana's calling point. It's her consistency. Montana's consistency has always been one of her defining features, and honestly, it's something that really sticks out. Most other Tier 10 battleships are very hit or miss. As in, one volley you get really good dispersion, and the next volley you end up with your shells in a different postal code. So what you end up with, when it comes with regards to Montana, is a battleship that is not only very dangerous to fight against, it's like when it comes to, just sheer striking power. I mean, Montana has like the 3rd heaviest broadside in the game at 162,000 alpha damage. It's that consistency as well. Montana's ability to deliver really big hits has never really sort of faded away. And, that's the sort of thing that keeps cruiser players sweating. Like, you have to respect this ship's guns. You can't just ignore it because it's like, oh, no 30mm overmatch. That hardly matters. If you position right, like if you get a central position on a map, or like if you can push out to the flanks and enemy ships are pushing into, you get those broadsides for free, and Montana's consistency allows you to punish them. And that's what's really great about Montana. Just the consistency. And if you have to resort to high explosive, by all means, resort to high explosive. Montana's HE performance is actually pretty good. 5,700 alpha damage, 36% fire chance, 68mm of penetration. Now, you're not a conqueror by any means, nor are you a Thunder, and nor are you an HE Republic. But that HE performance allows you to set fires, and you pen almost all armor minus some very select plates. Like, for example, Brandenburg and Friedrich Grosser have like 80mm deck sections, so you don't pen that. But, you can set fires and you can deal pen damage, and if you have to deal with the battleship, load the HE in a Montana and you will get results. As for the other thing, her secondary battery is kind of forgettable. It's not as long ranged. It has similar range. I think it's because I have APRM that, the secondaries do actually have a range. Its stock range is like just under 7. You're never going to build into secondaries when you're playing Montana. The dispersion isn't that good, the reload is very sluggish. Like, it's a 4-second reload on her secondaries. I think Ohio is something like 3.4. So, don't build secondaries on a Montana. I mean, you can if you want to meme around and co-op or something, but you're never going to get use out of these in most games, because Montana's ideal fighting position is really around 13 to 15, maybe 16 kilometers. If you want to take pot shots, by all means, but stay at those distances and her guns will work magic for you. You don't need to push in and brawl at this thing unless it's absolutely necessary. Airstrike, we're just going to gloss over this because airstrikes are kind of borked at the moment, where there's a lot of changes that are occurring to it. So I'm not really going to go into too much depth. All I'm going to say is they're a fairly decent self-defense weapon, considering that they, as of now, they do a lot of damage. There's like 6 bombs. You get like 12 bombs total, and the recharge is also fairly quick. So yeah, that's pretty good overall. Air defense. This is something Montana used to be known for, and now it's kind of fallen out of favor. And there's a reason for this. It's because they borked, like they didn't bork anything, it's just that everything kind of went to crap. So it's like, yikes. Because AA doesn't really do that much anymore. I mean, if you run into like a tier 8 CV, like a Kaga, or like a Parzival that has like no plane HP, you can have fun. But if you run into something like like a Shikaku or a Chkalov or a Pobeda, no, you're not going to really do that much. I mean, that said though, Montana, it's not like you can neglect the AA. Her values are still fairly solid. She does have very solid short and medium range anti-aircraft defense, and she does throw out 8 flak. So, if you're priority sectoring and you like something like an FTR, not just flak, you're going to do a lot of damage to carrier planes. In a long-term perspective, you're going to get constantly striked. And considering Montana's maneuverability problems, it's not exactly that healthy. So carrier games, just be wary. You can shoot down planes, just don't expect to shoot down planes all the time. Now I'm going to move on to maneuverability, and this is sort of Montana's sore spot. She's a very good top speed of 30 knots. She has a fairly okay-ish turning radius of 950 meters, but then you take a look at that rudder shift, 22.2 seconds. And this is the reason why I run propulsion module. It's because I want to be able to get off my, I want to be able to get off from like a kiting position and move into a brawling position, or get off from a brawling position and get into a kiting position. The acceleration mod allows me to do that much more comfortably while coping with that rudder. And, you can take the legendary module, you can take rudder mod for it, but honestly propulsion module is just better because the improved acceleration time, it just allows you to get on your feet quicker. And that's something I find myself appreciating more than a lot when playing this ship. And finally, we're going to get to her concealments. Montana's concealment's actually pretty decent. It's not, like, this is one of the things that people really gripe about a lot. It's that, her concealment, like, if you compare Montana to Iowa, like, Iowa tier for tier is better than Montana for a couple reasons. 1, it's faster. 2, it's less clumsy. 3, it's stealthier. And it's still got a lot of health. I mean, 79,000 versus 96.3, like, tier 9, tier 10 difference is kind of large, but 79k versus tier 7s, yikes, that's kind of hard to kill. And, yeah. The other thing, but her concealment's not bad. I mean, it's like right in the middle of, tier 10 battleships. It's not as good as something like a Thunder or a Conqueror, or Slava or Kremlin, but it's still pretty good. And, it's usable. That's what's important. And considering that Montana has like 27.5 kilometers of range to play with APRM, and you can get to like 30 plus with like spotter, um, it's not too much of a problem, honestly. It's pretty good. So overall, what do I think about the Montana? I'm not actually going to go into any gameplay because I do want to make these reviews shorter, just for your guys' enjoyment as viewers. So what do I think about the Montana? I think she's great. Like, she's a very solid tier 10 battleship. People do look down upon her, like, just because she doesn't have Overmatch, and, she doesn't have, like, say, any fancy gimmicks. Like, Colombo has Sav, GK has Hydro and secondary, Schlieffen is just a monster, Kremlin is pretty much indestructible if placed right. What makes Montana special, and what makes Montana good, is the fact that it just is normal. It's very plain Jane. It's not like an Ohio where it's, it's a Montana with all the weaknesses removed minus that giant superstructure. It's still, like, you know, it's a very vanilla battleship, and that's what I think makes her special. It's just the fact that she's a battleship. She just does what a battleship does very well. And that's what makes her so good. And, that's what I think people, like, neglect a lot. It's because when people take a look at, like, gameplay and fresh gimmick, like, they want gimmicks. They want, you know, they want something fancy. They want sap. They want bullshit high explosive. They want set hydro. They want secondaries. They want the ability to, you know, push and brawl and, do things with impunity and such. So people overlook the Montana and keep forgetting that Montana can do a lot of these things. Like, people look at see Montana on the enemy team, they're like, it's a Montana, it's only got 12 406s, I can just angle. And you're in a Des Moines and he slaps you through the ass for like 25k, and you're left wondering, why did I underestimate him? It's because Montana just does what a battleship does very well. That's what makes her good. And that's why she's earned my seal of approval. I've played, like, I can just check my stats on her very quickly and tell you that I've been playing her fairly well, actually. I have, like, 108,500 average damage. Like, I've played 122 battles with, like, a 56% win rate, you know? And I'm not that good of a player, right? And with that in mind, if it's just that Montana's so good, it's why, I'm a fairly decent player. I don't think I'm the greatest thing in the world. I'm just a simple guy from Kent making his way through things. And that's what sticks out. It's just that Montana's a superpower. Like, you can take a Thunder, you can take an absolute potato, like a 50% potato, and they will still do, like, 120k per game. Playing Montana is more difficult in the meta considering the fact that it has so many weaknesses. However, if you're a pretty decent player, Montana will make you look really good. Like, I've constantly racked up 150, 160k games, and, I've gotten a lot of... I think Montana has the most number of 200k games I have ever had in a ship. I think I have like 5 or 6 now, 200k games. And I have like 10 180k games, and I've gotten like a lot of 150, 160k games in this ship. I've got a lot of stinkers too, because I misplayed or things collapsed very quickly, I didn't get to do much. But, it really just goes to show you that Montana is... It's just the perfect battleship. I call it the platonic ideal of a battleship, and for good reason. Because it just does what it does very well. And for that, you can't fault it, honestly. Anyways, that's all I have for you guys today. As I said, I'm not going to go into any gameplay for this because I do want to shorten these reviews, and as I do get more ships, and as I re-grind through the British cruiser line, and I start grinding out a few new ships, I do want to keep things nice and tight. So that's all I have for you guys today. Next week's going to be a review of the Kleber, or I might actually review the Venezia, because I did get her quite recently. So, yeah. Anyways, take care. Catch you next time. Potato out.